Welcome to Talking True, where I'm speaking to mystics, near-death experiences, healers, and people waking up to the truth of who they are. So thank you for joining us today. And today I have a special guest. Her name is Meredith Walters. She's an author and a coach. And her journey, her awakening journey, started from a common place, I would say, which is through anxiety and depression. So, Meredith, thank you for joining me today. It's a real honor having you here.
Oh, thank you. And thanks so much for having me. I'm really happy to be here. And I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Excellent. So do you want to start with what that looked like, your awakening journey, and give people, viewers, an idea of what that was like for you?
Yeah, sure. So my journey started really in high school. I started to have a lot of mood swings and ups and downs, and eventually the downs got longer and more intense. And finally realized I was depressed. And I'd always kind of been anxious and in my head. So there was that aspect of it too. And it really got to the point where I needed to do something. And so I went to therapy for a year, didn't really feel better, and then eventually was willing to try medication. And my journey is a little interesting. It had some starts and stops, and it's been long. So basically, the medication helped. I didn't feel depressed anymore. I went to college. I thought everything was fine. But as it turns out, the underlying issues were still there. And in a good way, I wasn't able to ignore them forever. I think I needed that break. But eventually they started to resurface. I never liked being on medication for various reasons. So I'd keep trying to go off. Every time I went off, I get anxious and depressed again. Finally, I made one big attempt to go off. And when I went back on the medication, it just didn't work the way it had before. And even new meds didn't work. So I was kind of forced to try something else and pay more attention to what was going on beneath the surface. And so basically it was a long road with a lot of help from a lot of people, and eventually a lot of help from the natural world. But I started to realize, like, the depression for me was like any other type of pain, just like when you put your hand on a hot stove and the pain directs your attention exactly where you need to be paying attention, as in, don't keep touching this hot stove.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the depression was like that for me, and it really pointed out the places where I had lost connection with myself, with other people, and then with the wider living world. Part of the losing connection with myself was losing connection with the things that I loved. As a kid, I loved to write really pointed stories about animals. That was kind of my favorite thing to do. I wrote one story about an opossum who was very happy until some people decided to turn his forest into condominiums. So there were a lot of stories like that. And then just I've always felt a kind of spiritual connection to nature, and I had lost touch with that. So over time, I'd also, was in my head a lot with the anxiety and ruminating with the depression, and I just had kind of lost complete touch with my body and my body's wisdom. So yeah, it was a slow road of kind of coming back, feeling the things that I'm sensitive, so feel things intensely, and kind of learning how to be with that. I think I didn't know before, so I tend to try to shut it down. And over time learned, again, with the help of many people and a therapist and lots of things, but eventually learned how to be with those more intense feelings and make space for them. Yeah, and then slowly began to reconnect with the natural world, and that reconnected me both with my body and my intuition, also with kind of a deeper part of me, what I think of as true nature. Seeing true nature out in nature, you start to realize, like, oh, that's who I am too.
Yes.
And yeah. And
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can I just unpick a few of the things that you said there? Because I think, all of it is obviously really relevant. And a lot of people struggle with the exact things that you struggled with.
Mhm.
And I think what happens oftentimes is that as as we go through, being a teenager and then into young adulthood and all of that, we can so easily disconnect
Mhm.
from our heart and soul and the things that nurture us and the things that feel relevant and real and true and authentic
Mhm.
to who we are. And
Mhm.
then we can easily get fooled into thinking that we have to become someone else in order to fit in with what we think the
Mhm.
world or our community wants from us.
Yeah.
So, do you, with respect to the sort of the nature part, being in nature and connecting with nature and all of those things,
Mhm.
do you have any simple practices for people, or did you follow simple practices, or was it just simply a case of you just going outside and being, out and about?
Yeah, so in the beginning, it was me going on walks to try to lower my anxiety and stress levels. And so I would just walk through some parks in the woods near my house. But what happened over time is I started to get to know the beings on my walks. I started to get to know the trees and then the boulders and the streams. And, I'd see the same lizard or the same spiders. So I started to familiarize myself with them more, and learn about them more. And so that was really connective. And then they started to feel, instead of like strangers, they were more like neighbors, and then, kind of like friends. And then eventually they started to feel like family. Um,
That, yeah,
yeah.
that's beautiful. Actually, that's a real the shamanic way of
Mm,
interacting with the world, right? Because and the yogic way as well. The yogis say there's only one consciousness or one self,
yeah.
supreme self, higher self, however you want to sort of
Mhm.
describe it. And everything is consciousness. So kind of interacting with a tree or with the movement of the leaves, like the palm trees here in the Bahamas, or the call of a bird, and all of that, you're really connecting in with your own soul or your own higher self, because
Yeah.
it's one and the same message. It comes from the same place. Um,
Absolutely. Yeah. And that was really the easiest place for me to feel that and connect with that part of that real sense of who I am, beneath everything else. And it just became it just felt so much easier for me. I had a really hard time accessing it in other ways, but nature, it was like obvious and clear. Um, and just now, one of my favorite kind of ways to connect on that level is just to sit still in my yard. Anywhere really, but just to sit still and just get in my senses and focus on what I'm seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching. Um, there's something really almost magical about being still and getting to know that place on such a deep level, day after day and season after season.
yes, and it's so immediate as well. I mean,
Mhm.
I had a huge kind of insight a few days ago, which actually isn't so deeply profound, but I realized I was just looking, as I often do, sit in the yard and look at the palm trees, and
Mhm.
there's a clicking sound that the palm fronds make that is really so beautiful, and
Mhm.
you can almost feel the silence from which that sound arises. Well, you can feel the
Mhm.
silence from which that sound arises. And
Mhm.
so with the sound and with the movement, I was watching it, and I'm one with it. There's no
Mhm.
kind of distinction.
Mhm.
And what I saw, I had this epiphany that you cannot be in nature and receive the gifts of nature and see what nature is about and how there's only one self here if you're sitting there in the mind watching or listening to nature. You have to drop down into your heart center or inside your body, however you want to sort of describe it, in order
Mhm.
to be able to see, feel, connect, and receive what nature is here to gift us with, essentially.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. That's beautiful. Yeah, and for me, when I was a kid, people used to always tell me you're always in your head. And I was like, well, where else would I be? I had no idea the alternative. And it took me a long time to realize that, yeah, the heart, the body, those are the alternatives. And nature kind of pulls us into them, especially if we let it, if we're paying attention to it. Yeah, it'll pull us into the body, and
Yes.
make it so much easier. Yeah.
Yes, and gift us with insights as well,
Hmm.
somehow there's teachings or there's lessons or there's messages that arise from sitting in that space of silence. So you went from kind of being anxious and depressed. You found a reconnection through nature, and then from there you deepened that connection, and then you were led to write your book. Or how did that kind of all come about?
Yeah. Well, speaking of insights coming through nature, a lot of what is in the book came through when I was walking or, in nature, just kind of it came, and it very much feels like it came through me, not, or in collaboration with the natural world, not from just something me only. So I've always loved to write. Like I mentioned, I filled up notebooks with stories when I was a kid. But when I was 12, I had the idea to write a novel. I loved writing so much. I was like, I'm gonna write a novel. Never occurred to me, this was a hard thing, or it, might not happen. I just sat down after school and would just write away for hours, loved it. And then next thing I know, I had a novel. It was about 140 pages long, typed up. So I was so excited to share it with other people. And I thought, oh my God, everyone's going to love it as much as I do. And so I entered it into my school's book contest. And, it's designed for like picture books and short books. And so they made me draw some pictures, which I thought was strange because the novels I read didn't have pictures, but, whatever. Okay. So I drew some pictures. And then I entered it. And like I said, I was so excited. And it came back with the second to lowest score possible. And I was just devastated. It just felt like, it was kind of my first realization that not everybody was going to love this as much as I did. And so it really kind of crushed my my little 12-year-old self. And I wrote a few short stories when I was in high school, and then I kind of stopped writing for a long time. As I was going on this healing journey and reconnecting with myself and nature, I started to have the bug to write more. And so I started writing just blogs for my coaching practice about some of the things I was noticing with clients. And then I had an idea for a series of short stories, kind of allegorical short stories about the first hero to ever go on a journey to find his calling. And so I wrote those as a series of short stories on my blog. And I was getting back into the creative writing. And then I was on a walk one day, coming back from a walk, and I saw this robin just on the side of the sidewalk. And there was something in the robin's eyes, something so knowing and wise and loving and just deep. And I immediately thought of how many hierarchies we humans put ourselves at the top of, right? That we're the smartest, the most evolved, the whatever. And in that moment, it was really hard for me to believe that we were at the top of any of those hierarchies. And so this idea of a novel where that's turned on its head, that idea of us being at the top, that came to me in that moment. And it just felt kind of like coming home, it was like, oh, and it felt I had a little bit of that 12-year-old self, like, wait, I can do this. For a long time, I thought, who can write a novel? That's such a big feat. And I would never be able to, have the idea or the plot or the characters and be able to write something that long and complex. But when the idea came, it just kind of slowly unfolded, and it just felt possible. And it felt also like it had a kind of purpose greater than me, which was helpful. So just, it went from there.
Excellent. And your book's called Find Your Wild Calling, correct?
That's just my tagline on my website, but the book is called This Animal Body.
Oh, This Animal Body. Okay.
This Animal Body.
Excellent. Yeah. And it helps people to connect in via the feeling, senses, being in nature, and all of those kind of portals, let's say, or entry points, right?
Yeah. It's really the way I think of it as a roadmap back to connection with yourself, other people, the wider living world. And it's about a neuroscience PhD student who is she's going to school to become a neuroscientist to find a cure for her depression. But her first day of class, she meets this strange group of talking animals who know things she doesn't. So she can't quite dismiss them as a dream, but she also can't believe they're real. So she starts to dig around and do some experiments and learn more about her own past before she was adopted to try to figure out what's going on. And so, it's very much a journey of her reconnecting with exactly what we were just talking about.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. And, you know, I think a lot of people struggle with that theme, so to speak, because I think we're taught, especially in the West, to dismiss anything magical that comes out of the natural world as being like, you know, like fairy tale-ish, or, you know, fairy dust. And it doesn't, you know, it's not real and it's not true. And you have to put the intellect on the pedestal, and, you know, you don't take note of your dreams, and you don't listen to your imagination, you know, all of those things. We're suffering, you know, in the West, we really suffer from that disconnection to our natural world, to one another, and to, you know, the deeper calling within us that is always trying to offer messages and signs and symbols and so on and so forth. All of which is right here if we're paying attention. But because you can't pay attention if you're in the head all the time.
Yeah, there's no space. I know that was true for me, you know, with all the thoughts and the planning and the worrying and all of that. I mean, there's just no space to notice anything else. And the thoughts are so loud and the other messages are so quiet and subtle. Yeah, it's really easy to not even know they're there.
Yes.
Yeah.
And, you know, one of the questions I'm often asked is, how can you tell the difference between, you know, the voice of your inner knowing, or the wisdom voice, so to speak, and, you know, thoughts rolling around in your head? And I always say there's a kind of a resonance, there's a pulsation of rightness when it's coming through nature, and it's gifting you this kind of message or this knowing, as opposed to these kind of repetitive loops that just can just go on ad infinitum, right? And keep you awake at night, make you crazy.
Yeah. Resonance is a good way of putting it. There's something about it that just feels like it. Yeah, feels right. It's almost like remembering something, like you knew at some point but kind of forgot. It kind of has that feeling to me often. It just feels true on a deep level. And I think for me too, and that's a question that comes up a lot in my work as a coach as well. And I always look at the energetic flavor of it, because I think, you know, habitual thoughts are often loud and insistent and dire and all or nothing. And if we don't do this or we do that, we're screwed forever. And just I've never the you know, intuition or the nature guidance, it's never has that quality. It's much softer, and it's, you know, it might point out a danger or something, but it's not in a frantic, urgent, dire way.
Yes. So you in your coaching work, do you tend to work with people specifically who are struggling with anxiety and depression?
Yeah, it's interesting because I don't market that as much. I mean, I talk about it freely in my bio on my website, but I don't, you know, I'm not a therapist, so I'm not specifically working on depression and anxiety. So mostly I'm helping folks who are unhappy with the work that they're doing, but they don't know what would make them happy or be more meaningful or fulfilling, or what their purpose is. So we are trying to identify those things. But a lot of the people that come to me do have a history of anxiety and depression. So there is some resonance there, I think, that, you know, calls them in.
Yeah, which actually is really great, because you have the direct experience of what that looks like, and then how to navigate it and how to work through it and how to come out the other end. It's really purposeful, and there's integrity with respect to what you're speaking about. You know, and the other part of what you've been saying is that with respect to anxiety and depression, there's can be this. I have a. Let me just backtrack a bit. I have a dear friend. Her name's Dr. Hetty Rosenberg, and she works with people who've been diagnosed with terminal illnesses, and they're really looking at the last phases of their lives. So she works with them on helping them recognize that they can make choices and they can be empowered with respect to how they want to kind of end their final days. But she speaks a lot about depression and anxiety, and she says depression is depressing your authentic self, or your true self, or your true nature. That's really what kind of depression is and what it does. And along with that, of course, when you're sort of depressing or denying your innate knowing, you're also depressing and denying your creative impulse, your creative expression, and so on. And through what you've shared about your own journey, obviously what happened is what through nature and through reconnecting and all of that, and your creative energy was unleashed, and you're able to express it and to share it with the world. So I'm saying all of that to kind of ask, when you're working with your clients, do you find that through working with them on anxiety and depression specifically, that they then unearth creative talents they didn't know they had?
Yeah,
Just
often that's part of the process. Because a lot of the work that I do with clients is helping them tune into their bodies and pay attention to them more and know what they're saying. Because often, even if we're paying attention, we've forgotten how to interpret it. So a lot of the work that I do with clients is helping them relearn that language of their body. And so, yeah, once they're doing that, they're getting signals, and they often do find, a more kind of creative desires, and also feel more confidence in pursuing them, because it's not so much about the outcome. Our brains get really hung up on the outcome, like, am I going to be a famous artist, and is it going to be good, and they can the body and the heart just aren't concerned with that so much, so they have the freedom to actually pursue the creative impulses they have.
yes.
And can I say just a little something about my experience with depression?
Yes,
In
yes.
regards to what you were just saying? Yeah, so that depressing, that's really interesting. And that is my experience with it. Definitely. And I also feel like, and part of what I explore in the book, in This Animal Body, is it feels like, to me, part of what's happened is, we've lost connection with the natural world as a society. I mean, you can see that in just how we're treating the planet, and what we're doing to other living beings on it. So that disconnection has a devastating effect on the world, but it also has a devastating effect on us and our own well-being. And my sense is that, a lot of the suffering that we have in the world today, and for me, that included depression and anxiety, comes from that disconnection. And so, instead of seeing depression as, a defect or a dysfunction, to me, it's in some ways a natural or a healthy response to an unhealthy world. It's pointing out, like I was saying before, it's bringing our attention to something that really desperately needs our attention, that point of disconnection. And so that was kind of part of why I wrote the book as well, is to stop, blaming individuals for their depression, and start looking at, so why do we have, so many people getting depressed at this time? And maybe it's not just something that these people are doing wrong. I don't think it's what people are doing wrong. Maybe it's something larger, pointing us to something larger.
Yes, yes. Because, I think what's happened is in, let's say, conventional medicine, we've been kind of brainwashed into thinking that we have to fix depression. We need to get rid of it, like it's some sort of enemy, rather than looking at what it's speaking to and what the deeper meaning of it is. And obviously, I'm not discounting the importance of seeing a psychiatrist or a psychologist or a specialist, if you're having especially chronic depression, but oftentimes the underlying issues are completely overlooked. Whereas certainly in the shamanic, on the shamanic path, and in Native American tradition and all of those things, you're invited to look at what is your soul telling you through this condition. And when you have the courage to do that, then it changes everything. Even if you're still, in need of some medication in the beginning, at least you have an understanding of what it's here to tell you.
Yeah. And I had the experience of both, because when I first went on medication and it just, kind of the depression went away, I think that was a really good thing, because I don't think I had the resources that I needed to delve into what really needed my attention. And I was so desperate. I mean, I don't know that I would have survived without that help. So I think that that has a place, and I'm very grateful for that. And yeah, absolutely, it was really, at least for me, necessary to also do the listening eventually at some point of what is my soul trying to tell me through this. And that is a good way of kind of summarizing how it felt. The healing process was learning how to listen. And yeah, and that it was, the pain was there for, like I said, for a reason. It wasn't just
Yes.
random. Yeah.
Yes, yes. And then when you do that, when you actually engage with a conversation with the condition, then you're gifted with this insight. And then that insight empowers you to then write the book or do something creative or whatever, and kind of unearth this energy and
Mhm.
then kind of move through it, and then get to a place where you feel gratitude towards the anxiety or the depression, because you know that it's kind of served its purpose. It's gotten your attention. Because
Mhm.
let's face it, these anxiety, depression, or whatever it is, frustration, they always get our attention, right? We can't pretend that they're not there, unless, of course, we're just medicating it heavily and trying to ignore it and get on with life. But that,
Yeah.
like you said, that you can only do that for so long.
Mhm.
And it's no way to kind of exist in the world.
Yeah.
Well, it's
Yeah.
it's deadening. It's really deadening rather than having vitality.
Yeah. It's painful in a different way. And I think if I hadn't have gotten so anxious and depressed, I probably would have just led a life of kind of low level misery and just felt like that's all there was. And,
Yes, and I think I hate to say it, but that's common.
that's how life is. So I am anxiety yeah, for helping me, forcing me to deal with things that I otherwise wouldn't have.
Hmm. Yes, because I mean, so what, from the starting point to where you are now, right, you've actually created this amazing these amazing resources for people to be able to sort of also receive help from, that
Mm.
wouldn't be there. None of that would be there if you just continued down the medication path.
Yeah. Well, it's like I often, an exercise I love to do with clients is having them tell the story of their life as a hero's journey. Because I think often we feel like we focus on the things we've done wrong and the, mistakes we've made where we were inadequate. And really the basic idea of the hero's journey, Joseph Campbell's, my understanding of his work is that there's a hero, they face a challenge, and only by going through that challenge do they get the boon that they then get to share with the world. And so, yeah, very much so. I mean, I think our challenges are really incredibly valuable and hard and difficult and painful. But they're very, very valuable when we can then share something with the world as a result.
Yes, and just kind of having that title in terms of your personal narrative, the hero's journey changes and reframes everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's like you said, it's so easy to get into the idea that your story has been a failure, or you've just made these terrible mistakes and there's no kind of
Mm-hmm.
recovery from that. And you can really get into a mind loop around decisions you've made, rather than thinking, wait a minute, let me just look at it from this
Mm-hmm.
different perspective, and then extract the gems from that
Yeah.
story. And
Yeah.
all,
Yeah.
and sort of see the thread through, that runs through it as well, right? Because
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, this is where the treasure lies, I think.
Yeah.
When you start looking at that and kind of examining that and telling the story, and not feeling shame around it, or guilt, or whatever that looks
Yeah.
like.
Yeah.
So with respect to how you work today, you have a private practice with clients who you work with one-on-one. Do you ever do group sessions and anything like that?
I do. I enjoy working with small groups. I'm an introvert, so I'm not a large group person, but I love if I can get a small group that's intimate and we get to know each other. I love that. And I have worked with groups in the past. I find that most people, if they're in a group, really love it, but if they have the choice between working individually and in a group, they will almost always opt for individual. Um, I think that's just part of our culture. And I think I'm, have the same bias, but it's just, I found that a little unfortunate because it is really, there's kind of a magic in working in a group that we don't get with just one-on-one work.
Yes, because it's like the wisdom is multiplied, isn't it? You
Mhm.
know, and then you can also feel the benefit of your own sharing, sharing your own wisdom. So there's value in that
Mhm.
as well.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the ripple effect is really huge. Um,
Mhm.
so what does that look like in terms of how people can connect with you? Are these like sessions online, or is it face to face work that you do?
I do online sessions, the majority of them, but I also, if for folks who are local in the Atlanta, Georgia area, then they're welcome to come to my home office and do it in person. So there's that option. But these days, most people opt for the virtual. There's a lot of traffic in Atlanta, so that's another
Yes.
another factor. Yeah, yeah, but it
Yeah.
works. It works well either way.
Nice. That's certainly one of the benefits of COVID, right? We've gotten used to being online a lot more, and actually, in many ways, it is a time saver. That's for sure.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So are you? Tell us about your. Do you have any new projects going on? Have you got any new books that you're working on? You know, what's happening now?
Yeah, thanks for asking. Well, I'm working on a book, another novel. So it's a little different than the first one. It's a middle grade or YA. I'm not sure yet. Anyway, science fiction, but so that's kind of going slowly in the background. And then I'm just continuing to coach, and I'm thinking of trying to offer some more workshops and maybe some retreats. I've done a few nature walks and things, and I really enjoy doing things out in the natural world. So I'm kind of thinking about some offerings for how I can continue those.
Nice. Have you got any workshops coming up online?
I don't. Yeah, I actually want to do one on writing the story of your life as a hero's journey. So yeah, if anybody's interested, they can go to my website and sign up for the newsletter, and I'll definitely announce that when it's ready. But I don't have anything scheduled right now.
Well, there you go. There's your prompt to get that started. The heroes. I think that would be fantastic. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know anybody else that's doing that, and doing it as a workshop would be, you know, accessible for most people. I think, you know, it'd be
Mhm.
really good. And can
Yeah.
we just talk a bit, you know, because I think this is valuable for viewers as well. If they want to find out or work with you one on one, what would that look like? Do they just
Mhm.
send you an email and you get set up that way?
Yeah, they can send me an email, or kind of easiest is if they go to my website, go to the coaching page, and there's a link, there's multiple links there to request a free complimentary consultation. So I like to talk to folks before we start working so we can just get to know each other a little bit and make sure there's a good fit. And so that's really the next step would be to fill out a request for that consultation, and then I'll get in touch with a time we can talk and go from there.
Oh, brilliant. So I'm just going to kind of throw this out there and you can
Mhm.
say no, but you know, could I or should I put that on in the show notes so that if people want to claim a free kind of little you know, discussion with you, they can just hop on there and connect with you.
Yeah, absolutely. You
Yep.
could link to that form, or the page with a link to the form. Yeah, either one.
All right. Okay, brilliant. That's really sounds really good. Well, I think we're kind of getting to the end of our time together, but before we go,
Mhm.
just if you'd like to share anything, I don't know, any nuggets of wisdom or anything that you feel would be helpful for the viewers before we go, and then also let people know where they can find you. That'd be really great.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for the opportunity. I guess so. Just one thing I didn't touch on that I feel like when we're talking about returning to authentic self and your creative vision, and creating your own unique path in the world, is remembering that it's not something foreign to you or something you have to try really hard to do. And this is one of the biggest things that the natural world has shown me, that um, bees they're just gathering their pollen and their nectar and doing their thing, and yes, they are actually causing the conditions in which plants can reproduce and our world can continue on, and life happens. But it's not because they're just doing what comes to them naturally. And when I look at bees, joyfully, it seems like to me. And same thing for all of the other animals out there. They all play a role and support all of the life around them and make it all possible, just by doing what comes to them naturally and usually easily. And so that's been really helpful once I realized that on my own journey, that, you know, I don't have to try so hard. I don't have to get it all right. Don't have to get it all perfect. I can just do what comes to me naturally. And that's how I contribute to something larger. So that would be my parting thought. Yeah, and if folks want to get in touch with me, the easiest way is probably just to contact me. There's a contact form on my website, meredithwalters.com. And they can also find my book there, links to buy This Animal Body or whatever else they're interested in. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you so much. That's really, I love that. Do what comes naturally. And it's so simple. Yeah, it's so true, isn't it? Because it shouldn't be an effort. You know, in this world should not take so much effort if we're being our authentic self and living true to what our heart and soul is guiding us to do. So thank you for sharing that. It's really beautiful. Thank you so much.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed talking to you, and I love talking about this stuff. So I appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Meredith.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for taking the time to join us today. I really appreciate it. I appreciate you. If you feel that this content has values, then let other people know. And if you haven't already subscribed, you know what to do. So thanks again for being here. And I look forward to seeing you again soon. Take it easy, be well, and bye for now. Bye.